Land. I'm Steve McGauley, editor-in-chief of TMStash.com, and with me today is Joseph Gagel, our Marvel specialist, and John Gruccio, our senior editor for movies for TMStash.com. And this is our first attempt at what we're calling Movie Stash, where we are going to talk about the best movies. And today we are talking about the best movie of the summer in Guardians of the Galaxy. Welcome, gentlemen.
How's it going?
So I had to cut us off because we just started talking before the show because we just couldn't help ourselves because we were all pretty impressed with Guardians of the Galaxy. But first impressions, guys, and for reference here, we're going to keep it spoiler free for as long as we can through the beginning, and then we're going to go full out spoilers. So first impressions. John, what do you got?
I thoroughly loved the movie. Went into the theater kind of thinking, I didn't know how well it would do. I mean, I already seen the reviews, but I'm a different person than most other people. I mean, as everybody else is different. But I think this movie was something that Marvel definitely took a gamble on, and I think it was a very successful gamble, and I think it's going to do. I mean, not only are the careers of some of these up and coming actors going to be just launched because of this, but I mean the movie itself will be probably a classic in Marvel cinema.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that, but yeah, it probably will be one of the classics. Probably one of the classics for our generation, I hope.
I hope.
Joe, what
Yeah,
what were your first impressions?
you know, and to sum it up in a sentence, I can say I haven't had this much fun at the movies since I've seen the Avengers. So that kind of tells you how, in my opinion, how much weight this film carries. And I even think that in my own right, I'm a big sci-fi guy, so I might even give it that slight edge and say it might be better because, for me, and maybe hopefully for the rest of the Marvel fans, this shows us that and reminds us that there's still more good films to come from Marvel, not just mediocre or anything. They're going to keep pushing the envelope, and this really, also, this really opened the door for any other more cosmic universe they want to build on, whether it be Adam Warlock, Nova, anything else out there from the cosmic realm they still have the rights to is now open territory, and even other unknown properties as well.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. But I think for it to even make it even shorter, sum it up into one word, I would say I was impressed with the movie. The movie did so many things so well, and kind of as John alluded to, he was kind of skeptical as to what was going to happen because I think we all knew it was kind of a big undertaking for this movie. You had James Gunn, who is directing his first big movie, Chris Pratt, who's leading in his first big role ever, and John said pre-show this was his one and only shot to make a name for himself in movies. And you had unknown characters that no one outside of the hardcore comic book world knew anything about, and a world that doesn't exist. So for them to be able to introduce all these new characters, nail every single character spot on throughout the entire movie, and to create this artificial universe that Guardians takes place in, because it just takes place in space. There's no like 25 years in the future, but it's really taking place on Earth 25 years in the future. This is taking place on planets that don't exist in a time frame that doesn't exist, and they did such a marvelous job of creating all of these things and putting it all together and having it all make sense.
I also,
So,
if I can comment real quick, I also think one of the gifts that James Gunn really did for this film is the story is about a bunch of misfits. And when you think about all these actors that they got, Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Bradley Cooper, and Vin Diesel, Does that not just sound like a group of misfits already?
Yes.
They were like, much like Tony Stark and Robert Downey Jr. Very similar, mirror each other. I think you can see a lot of that in these characters. That there's something about each of these actors that kind of shows through in these characters that it's more natural, organic, if you will.
I mean, I remember James Gunn in an interview. This is probably this January after they cast. They said that Bradley Cooper was playing Rocket. He was talking about Dave Bautista because everybody was saying, "Really, really, you want this guy to be Drax? He can't act. He's just a wrestler." And he said in an interview that the moment he saw him step into their little booth or whatever it was, he knew Drax had been cast. I mean, that just tells you James Gunn, he's definitely a director on the rise. He knows what he wants, and he knows who's got it.
And his most popular, arguably, most popular actor in the movie, Bradley Cooper, wasn't physically in the movie. You would never know that was Bradley Cooper behind the voice of Rocket. Unless
No, I was
you
going
read
to
IMDb.
It didn't even sound like him. And you could barely tell, but if you didn't know Bradley Cooper's voice, you might not be able to pick it out. But it still worked fantastically.
No, there's no way. There's no way you would know that Vin Diesel was Groot either. By the way, there's a hilarious video on Marvel's website of Vin Diesel doing "I am Groot" in like 8 different languages, and it's hilarious. And he does it like he's like in like on a soundstage doing the voicing, but he's still wearing stilts, so he's like 9 feet, 10 feet tall. With the mic, raised up and doing his "I am Groot" lines from stilts, like 10 feet in the air, so he could be part of the character.
I believe Vin Diesel did a lot of the motion capture for Group 2, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
But James Gunn had his brother was like the stand-in motion for Rocket.
Yeah, he was Sean. He was also Yondu's right-hand man.
Yeah, I was going to say he was.
Oh, well, the other name we're not mentioning that we should mention is Ronan's right-hand, daughter is played by Jillian. I can't think of her first name. From Doctor Who. Sorry?
Karen Gillian.
Yeah. And she's unrecognizable.
Who shaved her head for the movie. At last year's Comic-Con, she took off her wig and showed the clean-shaved head.
Yeah, that was sad.
Ballsy, though. But definitely ballsy.
Yeah. But she was, but Ronan was awesome. He was.
That's what I was going to say. Ronan was very good.
Lee Pace, very good. Definitely. Lee Pace, ever since I've seen him in Pushing Daisies back in the early 2000s, I always thought he had something. And then seeing him like in the Hobbit movies, the guy is definitely cut out for sci-fi.
He was. He is one of the lead characters in *Halt and Catch Fire*.
Mm-hmm.
And he is very good in *Halt and Catch Fire*. That's where I recognized him from the most, because that season just ended, and I was like, "That's Lee Pace. That's awesome." He was so good. And then Michael Rooker.
Yeah. It was almost like just a more hilarious and more sadistic version of Merle from Walking Dead.
Yeah, it really was. He was just a blue, sadistic version of Earl.
Who could whistle really good.
Right.
And I know we're going to go spoiler free, and I'm going to try to keep it as clean as possible. But got to talk about Thanos just a little bit. I thought he looked really good, and good old Brand looked pretty good as Thanos as well, I thought.
Okay, so for those who don't want spoilers, I'm probably going to have to tell you to turn it off now with our last advice.
They've already announced it.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about what he does. I was just wanting to say that not only was he in it, but he was very impressive, and it was a good scene, and he looked really well done.
Just so we can move forward and get into the spoiler zone, just general wrap up of. I think everyone should go see this movie. Everyone, including like my wife. I took my wife, who was not even looking forward to this movie very much at all. I was kind of dragging her along, and she was just. I've been talking about it, and she was just like, "Yeah, okay, I'm going. I like movies," and she loved it.
If you ever have wanted to see Benicio del Toro play David Bowie or see John C. Reilly as a cop, go see this movie.
Yes, yes. And I was telling Steven earlier that this movie has so many characters, but it doesn't feel overcrowded because all the information kind of flows very smoothly with the plot and story. That it doesn't have that overcrowded feeling, and it's just everyone who is who they are, and it's almost, once again, and I say this a lot, it's almost like the Star Wars element this film has, where they've created this universe and they just drop you in the middle of it, and there you go, and you just kind of move forward with what it is, and if they need to explain something, they do, and if not, they just move along, and it works.
Yeah, it hasn't really been done since like Star Wars and like our recent Star Trek movies that we've seen like universes like this created. I think that's why. There are some reviews on the internet that were talking about this being a funny version of Star Wars, and that if it was kind of a Star Wars like experience for some at the movie theaters. I don't know if it was that groundbreaking because back in the day, it wasn't that out there. It's not like the first time special effects were really being done in theaters like Star Wars was to that effect, but I think it was the first time in a very long time that we've seen this type of universe created and done so well. And most importantly, I think it's one of the first times we've seen comedy and action done so well. I mean, just done perfect balance of both throughout the entire 2 hours.
I mean, when I saw this movie, the one thing I took away from it is just these are just a group of actors and people who are filming them. Everybody's just having a great time. I said, You can tell everybody was having a great time just by how the movie was. The director was having a good time. I'm sure whoever scored the movie was having a good time. Just a bunch of people who have come together and really enjoyed what they were doing.
The score was, the whole soundtrack of the movie was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And it just played right into the whole look and feel of the movie. I think, like, the opening scene, Joe and I were talking about this earlier, the opening scene of, Chris Pratt and just putting on his headphones. I said this is kind of post-openings, the second scene, if you will.
Yeah.
Him walking around the planet, slams on his headphones. He's walking around kicking these little rat dinosaur crazy cool creatures that were created, and he's just jamming, having a good time, and it totally sets the tone.
As a microphone.
What was that?
He used one of them as a microphone.
Yeah, that's right. He totally
in a way,
sets the tone for the whole movie.
In a way, the music also it really showed, because when you see Chris Pratt, you see a thief, more or less. You see a guy who is considered honorless, has no intentions of helping anybody else other than himself. But the music is a way that we see deeper through him. It's a way of character development. We see that there is more to him, which I thought was cool. I've never seen that done before, taking like all these really good songs and showing them how a character can be developed.
Yeah, it's all linked back to like the very beginning of the movie and how he obtained that soundtrack, and so I thought it was good. And again, we're going into spoilers now, so turn off if you're gonna go see this and haven't had a chance to see it. Stop watching now. The very opening scene of the movie I thought was really cool, in how they showed how his mother died and kind of created that link with, like you said, the cassette tape, to his mom. And I was really impressed that they kind of went back that far and started establishing the story from there and didn't just throw us into the characters.
I mean, the movie, and I mean, even of course at the very end with Rocket and Groot, even the emotional scenes. I mean, you would hear some tear jerkers in the audience. I mean, they were able to capture like the really heartfelt emotions of the movie.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of had a bit of everything.
Yeah.
Like it had the comedy and the action, but it was captivating.
And I mean, hitting on where Joe spoke of earlier, which I don't necessarily think is a spoiler because everybody, if you catch up with Comic Con, then you know Josh Brolin is Thanos due to his appearance with the Infinity Gauntlet on his hand. I mean, he definitely gave us a good taste of what we're going to be seeing, and I guarantee we'll be seeing him in Avengers 2 at some point. But I mean, I never would have thought how badass. I mean, it was almost like you got a guy who's just really big, just laid back in his throne, but at any second could just rip the spirit out of your body. I mean, and Josh Brolin just, I mean, he screams that kind of person. He's just like laid back, like, I'll kill you, but I'm just going to sit right in my throne, with my feet up. But I mean, and like, Brolin, I think even for like being on the screen for like 5 minutes, I think he really did that. And that was one of my main curiosities. Is we all, of course, saw at the end of Avengers the guy on the prosthetics and stuff like that, and I was curious how different he was going to look, but he didn't really look that much different.
What really surprised me was that they obviously killed off his right hand man from the Black Order, Corvus. With they had him knocked out by Ronan real quick, and I thought to me as a comic fan that was a really big thing for me. So that makes me wonder, are we going to get to see more members of the Black Order, because obviously his right hand man just got taken out. And I even thought that encounter with between Ronan and Thanos was very imposing and very well done.
I mean, he just let him do it. He didn't even say anything.
Well, he kind of has to. I mean, he knew he's Thanos, but I mean, it was a really good way to establish Thanos for the audience. Like I said, it's such a delicate balance with all of these comic book movies, especially. Would you say Joe? Would you say that this is one of the more important comic book movies to be done because of the way that it had to kind of follow the comic books to appeal to that audience, because of the fact that you're bringing in one of the largest villains in the comic book universe through this unknown movie? That they had to follow the comics and be more true, where they could kind of run wild and free with just like someone like Iron Man, which.
Well, I think it's a good start, and especially like we said earlier, if you want to build this universe over here, because you've already built this universe over here on Earth, so now you're going to build this universe over here, and you're probably going to expand it to the size that it is. That the Earth universe is, and then you're going to have those two meet for this epic Infinity movie whenever that's going to take place. And so I think for that part alone, it was important enough for it to succeed. I don't think it was completely necessary for the comic book fans, because I read some statistic where, the people that currently read the Guardians of the Galaxy comic around the neighborhood of 20 to 30,000 people. So, that versus everyone else who's going to go to see the movie. I think if you do it well enough like they did as far as the origin stories and make some of the elements very relatable like they did, it's you'll even make the people like me happy. And I didn't feel like anything was too deviant. Obviously Yondu and his origin story wasn't exactly the way it happened in the comics, but that didn't bother me one bit, because I thought it was a good way to bring in another member of the original Guardians of the Galaxy and utilize that character with a great actor. And I felt that it did everything it was supposed to do, and maybe a little bit more.
I agree. I like I said, I mean, my wife was able to come watch it and wasn't even that thrilled about it, and she was able to enjoy the movie. I don't think she loved it nearly as much as I did, but she still was very entertained by the movie and very much liked it, which that was probably the biggest telltale for me as to how the general audience was going to perceive this movie. And I kind of I went into it. I mean, Joe and I both went into it, very excited, expecting a lot. So for me, I almost feel like it was even harder probably to impress us because we went into it with such high expectations, and for it to come across the way it did and do everything the way it did, which was perfectly, is awesome.
And if I may, real quick, I also think this also helps about in the long run because I feel like if they make this movie, and of course they did market it very well and really did let people know this was coming, but this also, when you see that they did this well with with a fairly unknown property, this kind of makes Ant-Man sound like it might work. You know what I mean? Because there's been a lot of production problems with Ant-Man, so this might, kind of also push that to where people are like, well, you know what? We've heard all these bad things about Ant-Man, but I didn't know anything about Guardians of the Galaxy, and I loved it, so I might as well give Ant-Man a chance. And that's the unknown, viewer like your wife or whatever, or and it may even instill some more confidence in people like me who know about Ant-Man and know the trouble that the film has had. So I think it'll help that out, as well as other future properties like Doctor Strange, Black
Well, I
Panther.
doubt Ant-Man's going to get the budget that Guardians did, because
Well, yeah,
I
true.
think Guardians' budget was really high. I don't remember what it was. I'm trying to look it up, but I am on Box Office Mojo, and holy cow! So opening day, which I don't know if they're counting Thursday and Friday. I'm assuming
I
they
think
are.
I think they're counting Thursday if it's what I think you're talking about.
37.8 million opening day.
I think it
And
was the biggest opening. I think it was the biggest opening night of the Thursday night of the summer.
domestic total as of today is 94 million. So it's going to break 100 million opening weekend, and they were only projecting it at 77.
Yeah. They got a winner.
It is doing well.
And I mean, obviously, Marvel thought it was going to do this well because they announced.
Production budget 170 million, not including they probably doubled that in advertising. But go on, John. Sorry.
Well, I mean, obviously, you think Marvel. Well, of course, Marvel knows everything. They have like black rooms where they have all this stuff pinned up, and they already said that the sequel will be July 28th, 2017. So obviously, that tells you that they expected this to be a success.
Well, and I'd said this before in the last week's weekly stash and the week before, yeah, last week, that the fact that they were doing screeners last Tuesday and this past Tuesday, so for the past 2 weeks they've done screenings for the press. For them to do screenings almost 2 weeks in advance for a movie shows that they have a lot of confidence in the product. Because otherwise, they'll only do one screening that Tuesday or Wednesday before. But if they do it a week before that, that means that they know it's good and they want the press to write about it. So they're going to do 2 screenings and give the press a lot of time to get their writing done. So that's a bold move. You don't see that happen too often outside of indie and horror movies.
And something else that tells us that Marvel has come out and said that they want to keep their formula of a sequel movie and a new movie every year. That's their target. So I can't remember if 2017 is a 2 or a 3 movie year, but if that's their sequel for the year, then more than likely the other movie will be a new property like Doctor Strange, Black Panther.
2017, I think, begins the three movie year.
So that'll be.
I'm sorry?
What year starts the 3 movies?
I think it's 2017 or 2018. I'm pretty sure it's 2017, though.
Yeah, I think it's 2017 too.
So that would mean we'd have one in May, one in July, and then one in November.
I would almost count on the November being another sequel and the July being a fairly new property.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the one thing that we need to think about, though, and I kind of mentioned this earlier with Thanos, if they're doing a Guardians of the Galaxy 2 in 2017, then it's almost guaranteed that Avengers 3 will be that next year. And I guarantee Thanos will be well, Joss Whedon already said that Thanos is going to be the main villain in Avengers 3.
Mm-hmm.
So could we be seeing a crossover between Guardians and Avengers?
That's when you start tapping into the infinity.
Exactly.
Well, and I was having this conversation with someone earlier, and I kind of agree with it. They were like, do you call that an Avengers movie, or do you just call it Marvel's Infinity War? Because by that time, you're going to have these two completely different universes that are going to combine to fight this force. So, do you call it the Avengers movie because that works, or do you call it or you just call it Marvel's whatever?
Marvel's big old movie that people are going to go see.
Yeah.
I would have to say that the Infinity movie is a much more distant product, like 2020 plus, because of the fact. And then the other thing to think of, and the question, which I'm curious about, is we know Thanos has crossed over into X-Men at points, correct, Joe? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I didn't read X-Men, but I know that he's crossed over, and Sony owns X-Men.
Fox.
So how much play does Marvel have in the universe in these movies? Because Sony's kind of gets to do whatever the hell they want with the property.
You mean Fox?
Fox has X-Men.
Yeah, Fox.
Fox has X-Men and the Fantastic Four, and there's been a lot of rumor that we could see them building a universe where those two properties cross over, because in the comics they do cross over. But I think they have a decent amount of wiggle room. The only one I'm not sure of is in the they in this film they talked about the Kree, which is an alien, big alien force in the comics, but the Skrulls is the other big one, and I'm not sure if they're going to be able to do that, because that might be specifically Fantastic Four, so they might not be able to do that. But I think they've got enough room. You know, I don't think they need the X-Men. I think it would be fun, but I don't see Sony or Fox. I would see them teaming up together before I would see them lending a hand to Marvel. Even though I would love Sony to do it just for Spider-Man, just to do that for one Avenger, but I just don't know. I think the fans would win, or the people that would win, and that's not what they're interested in. So,
No.
I mean, just adding on my reasoning for why I think there might be a crossover. For those, the people that went to Comic-Con this year, footage that they showed from Age of Ultron, the very end, where it shows Downey Jr. standing or waking up on a rock in outer space, and you see the rest of his team just laid amongst the rock, and then you see Cap's shield shattered. I mean, I can only think of one person that would have the sheer power to do something like that. So I know he's coming. I mean, that's what Joss Whedon has said, but I mean, it could be possible. I mean, they haven't said anything about it other than Thanos is the villain.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think that that's going to be the start. That'll be the start of it, and he may be the villain in similar way that he was here in Guardians of the Galaxy, to where you have Avengers 3, like you said, 2018.
Yeah.
And you have arguably, probably Thanos as the villain in Guardians. Thanos as part of the villain in each one of those movies year after back-to-back years. Then that would set them up to do a complete Infinity movie, 2020.
Yeah.
or I was going to even say, what if that May 2019 was their Avengers 3 target?
That's possible too.
To give them an extra year for story building and whatnot.
Yeah.
Or it could be like you said, Steven, 2021 or something like that, because I think they will have to do a lot to bring those two universes together if they want to build.
You're talking about a $250 million budget movie.
And of course,
likely.
And of course, a lot of people believe that that could be the last film for Captain America and Iron Man because their contracts technically run out at those times. Chris Evans has already said he wants to take a break, which makes a lot of people think that the Winter Soldier will take up the Captain America mantle, just like in the comics,
I
or
mean,
just like.
I say
Go ahead.
Avengers 3 is his last movie.
And even with what they've done now, you could either have the Winter Soldier take up, or you could have Falcon take over because they've already introduced the Falcon, so they could go one way or the other with that, which I think would be work either way.
Yeah, but Sebastian Stan has already admitted that he has like a 7-picture deal, so I would put money on it being him.
Oh, for sure. I would lean towards that as well.
And as far as Iron Man, I mean, Robert Downey Jr.'s even said it publicly and said it in front of Kevin Feige that he wants to do another one. So I mean, if they do an Iron Man 4, I mean that's still to be seen.
Hmm.
I think that they'll probably be able to lock in Robert Downey Jr. for a few more movies, at least one. Even though he doesn't have a contract now, doesn't mean a contract won't come. Especially if he's been already vocal in the public that he wants to do another one. They'll find a way to get him paid. It's just
Yeah.
Hollywood. It's just Hollywood politics.
And then there's something else. John, you might know this more than I do, but one of these movie dates could be the Defenders movie from the culmination of the Netflix. I don't know if that's going to be a Netflix movie or if they were going to make that an actual budget screen film. So one of those dates could be that movie down the road
I
too.
mean, they're filming Daredevil right now, which I was kind of surprised that we didn't see anything from Daredevil at Comic-Con, and then I think next up on the block is Jessica Jones, then Luke Cage, then Iron Fist, and then we will have the Defenders. But we're talking like 2-3 years, probably before all these get lifted up off the ground, and they're all on Netflix. Well, 2 years. I'll say 2 years.
Yeah, it's gonna take some
Daredevil,
time for sure.
because Daredevil won't be on until next summer.
And then of course Mockingbird comes to Shield this season, so they're just making it so more richer with these characters, and it's I've said this before. This is probably the best time to be a comic book fan because there's just so much creativity going on.
Well, I have a question for you guys, since we are talking about spoilers. And yes, as we've admitted, Groot does die, but he does come back. And one of the scenes we see Baby Groot dancing, which is
Yes.
hilarious.
I want a baby Groot plant that dances on my desk at work. It's my new goal. I gotta find it.
But number 2, we see a very old Marvel character in the form of Howard the Duck, who was voiced by Seth Green. Could this be Marvel saying that they want to do another Howard the Duck film, or could this just be a goof by James Gunn?
I think it was a goof, but anything's possible.
Anything can, in all reality, in today's world, anything can happen. Because if you really think about it, I don't think they'll do a movie. Don't get me wrong. I don't think that there's really an avenue maybe for them to do a big movie. But with the power of things like Netflix, I mean, they could spin off a quick show or even do a spoof movie with Howard the Duck that just goes straight to Netflix.
Yeah.
But it probably isn't because I just look at it in the context of, he was at the Collector's and the Collector collects things, and so he had Cosmo the dog, and so he's got a talking duck, so it kind of makes sense, But at the same time, it was. I know a lot of people, and even in the theater, they were kind of like, well, what about the Avengers, And I didn't really have it in me to tell them, well, this isn't about the Avengers. This is about the Space Avengers. And that's down the road. I didn't feel like getting into all that.
Do you think we'll see the Collector again?
I hope so because I almost feel like his character was, I don't know,
Short-lived.
underplayed maybe in the film. Not by the actor, but just kind of. I always felt that he was way more important, and he was kind of like he kind of was, but his place was blowing up, and then it was kind of like, well, that's it,
Well, I mean, Thor, they did. Well, at the end of Thor, they made him seem like he was going to be a definite, player in the movie.
Well, and in that scene, you see there's the old thing. You see a cocoon in the background in one of those glass cages, and everyone is like, well, that's the cocoon that Adam Warlock should come from. So his place got destroyed. Is we don't know. Is Adam Warlock? Because he's a big part of the Infinity story too. So that's something that a lot of people think might get introduced in the second Guardians, and maybe even we'll get more of the Collector because he's a part of that world now. So, and
Well,
and
go
we know
ahead.
from the movies that he has the Aether, as already, which is supposed to be one of the Infinity Stones.
I
I
mean,
was just reading an article, and go ahead, Stephen.
they've left themselves open. They're putting pieces in place everywhere for them to be able to basically go anywhere. And they also plant those pieces for, I mean, they wisely plant these pieces in every one of these movies for people like yourself, Joe, that, are so well versed in the comic world, you'll pick up on these little intrinsic details in the background. So I think it's cool that they do that because it lends credence to, you picking up on things, but it also gives them the ability to bring it in, not bring it in. They wisely do it so that they can go wherever they want. They're not limiting themselves in any way.
I completely agree.
What were you gonna say, John?
Oh, I was just saying, I was reading an article earlier, and it says that as far as the sequel goes, I mean, there's still a lot going on, but I mean, the main stories that James Gunn, since he is directing the sequel, has talked about is, the relationship between Peter Quill's father and how exactly he was taken by Yondu, and then of course a lot of stuff with the Xandarian and Kree culture, as well as the Krylorians and the Ravagers. So I mean,
I'm expecting Nova.
yeah, I would say Nova's probably a good bet.
And that was one of my only. I'm not going to say disappointments, but if I had to pick anything out of the movie that I thought was like, kind of like what the heck was, you know, I don't know at what point in time or what they're drawing from the Nova Corps, but there was no member of the Nova Corps that displayed any cosmic powers. So I wonder how they're going to work that into the story, or if they even are, because they seem like a regular police force than a cosmic police force. So
Well, I mean, what they did to his ship, for one, was pretty impressive.
yeah,
Even
yeah.
pay off, which was sad. They probably lost their entire police force.
Well, and I was telling Stephen prior to the cast, I don't know if you knew John, but the character that John C. Reilly played is the actual comic book character that gives Richard Rider his Nova powers. So
Roman
that's
Day.
why that's why I hope that will eventually come to fruition in the next film.
I did not know that, but that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Well, one question I
That's what I'm
have,
here.
we were talking about Karen Gillian earlier. Do you think we're going to see Nebula again? Because as you remember, she did make her escape.
Absolutely, and it makes sense. You have to leave some people alive like that. That can just kind of come in and out of these movies, and help. It helps build some of the universe as well. Because you're always going to have that struggle and that strife between her and her, you know, quote unquote sister Gamora. So there's so much more of that to develop, as well as her own relationship with Thanos.
You kind of sound like Robert Kirkman there, Joe. It's like, I know when each character's going to die, and today is not your day. Live to see another movie.
But I did really appreciate how they worked her out of the film towards the end. Showing that, like Gamora, both of them have been enhanced cybernetically in some ways to make them stronger, because that's Thanos' way. To make them stronger no matter what. No more. Replace pain with power, basically. So that was cool just to see. She's like, I'll take my hand off. I'll make another one. It's no big deal. No big deal. What about it?
I mean, speaking of Gamora, can we just give Zoe Saldana the award for Sci-Fi Queen? Just have Sigourney
Right.
Weaver give it to her? Because, I mean, the
Yeah.
interview with MTV was, what's the next color you're going to do, Zoe? She's been green, she's been blue.
Yeah,
But I mean, she's such a
what's the next color
badass,
of the
man,
year?
and that's why we love seeing her in these kind of things.
But she was so good. in this movie and in Star Trek.
I mean, I have to say, probably one of the funniest scenes is when Quill tries to put the moves on her with the song. I think it was Lionel Richie
Yeah, yeah.
that puts a blade to his neck. She's screaming out because of the music in her ears. Oh, that was hysterical.
Yeah. I was
There
telling
were
him that too, that I like.
that were hilarious.
There were a lot of cool things like where like Peter Quill would do something and he would be like, everyone knows that, right? But he's from Earth and not everyone in the universe gets that. You know, like all those little jokes where he's like, you get it right, and they're like, no.
And they're like, that went way over his head. And Drax goes, nothing goes over my head. My hands are way too fast.
Stop. But at the very end, he kills somebody and says a metaphor.
Yeah, a finger across the neck. It's a metaphor.
Oh.
All right, well, wrapping it up, I think we've pretty much hit everything in this movie that you could possibly think of. Anything else you guys want to talk about regarding
so.
the Galaxy?
Go see it more than once.
Yeah.
It's at 160 million worldwide, 94 million domestic. It is going to be in theaters for quite some time. Its next big competitions next week are going to be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
It'll be there.
It should.
But
it was awesome. It's worth seeing, and it's good fun for all ages, pretty much. So, with that being said, we'll be back tonight to do the weekly stash, where we will focus less on Guardians of the Galaxy and talk about everything else that's happening in the comic book world. But until then, have a good day.
Later, guys.
See ya.